Even with the nerf, this is still one of the most consistent and really profitable farm of the league. I'm talking about Abyss and Risk farming. In this video, I'll go through everything you need to know about the strategies, how I set it up, how I self-sustain everything from start to finish. And yes, this is one of the T16.5, T17 map farm strategies, so it is a bit higher budget. But without further ado, let's get into it. Let's talk about the elephants in the room, and the first thing here is you do not do the strategies without a strong build or a build that have caster masteries to open chests. This is because we are using the scarabs of Redviles, and this will spawn a lot of Abyss Hoards, and you really want to have the caster mastery to open all of these Hoards without having to click on each of them. So yeah, you can play a non-caster build and use Unearth, but you have to spend that extra 6 points to get to the caster masteries. Or you could just play a build that have caster mastery built in and you just waste 1 point to spec into it. At this point in the game, you should have the currency to invest into build that is capable of doing this, especially self-cast caster is very strong this league due to the Soul Eater text. But anyway, yeah, if you need a build, I do have a build guide on the build that I'm currently farming. It's budgets, it's about 100 divines, but you need that much to be able to farm Abyss onto Risk Scarabs. Now the second thing here is we easily self-sustain all of my T16.5 and T17 map, so there's no need for me to go trade maps or anything like that. It's very annoying. I'll have a showcase where I show the loots a bit later, but I start from like 10 maps and by the end I was able to have like 36 map of T16.5 Canyons map, which is one of the best map for Abyss farming currently. All of our scarabs are easily buy on the exchange as well, and we self-sustain almost all of them, but not all of them because we want to spec into the expensive scarabs. In terms of drops, the drops are very easy to liquidate. We have scarabs, we have currencies, fragments, divination cards, and we have a bunch of maps. As it happens, the Strats was run and tested by Redviles from all last league, and he was using this to farm div card. So if you scry some good div card onto the map, you can expect some pretty consistent profits or even jackpot from your div card as well, which I'll also get into. And for the maps, you can very easily put in the dump tag. We are running the Scabs of Corruption, so you can sell your T16.5 in modern maps for some pretty good profit as well. So if you can spec into caster masteries, you want to find a farm that can easily self-sustain and is very profitable, and the loots are easy to liquidate so you don't have to do a lot of tradings, then this is your farm. Alright, so since a lot of you guys have liked the spreadsheet I did last time, I'm going to do the same thing here as well. And I will go through all of this later, but if you want to know more on the strats, everything is there. But first, I want to talk about the profits and the investment as a starter package, because you want to be able to run and self-sustain all your map after this. So for example, I invested about 12.8 divines over here for 10 T17 abominations and 10 T16.5 8 mod canyon map. And my expectation is after I run 10 of these and 20 of these maps, then I don't ever have to buy maps ever again. These are my average time for each maps, and each map give me roughly 50k of gold, so that's pretty good as well. Looking at the stats over here for Wealthy Exiles, it's roughly 30 divines of loot for 10 maps and 35 divines of loot for the T17 maps. Obviously, Wealthy Exile is not that accurate, so I do have to go down and sort it all the loots, and I break down the loot to give you a better pictures, because these numbers can be quite deceiving if you are just looking at Wealthy Exiles. So here is the breakdown of all the loots, sorted out and everything, and I only try to calculate the loots that I am willing to sell. And the investment here is 12.8 divine, like I said. We are only calculating the map costs, scarabs, and some map rolling costs. But overall, yeah, 12.8 divines. Now, the revenues comes out to be 66.2 divines, and this is the rough breakdown of all the loots that we got, you can kind of see all the loots that I'm willing to sell only, and it's easy to liquidate on the currency exchange. We have the fragments, currencies, maps, and you can kind of see we started with 10 maps and now we are at 36 T16.5 canyons and we at 15 abominations. So really, really easy to sustain maps if you're willing to run these maps and if you're willing to roll these maps for the more maps percentage as well on the T17 maps. Next up, for the div cards, we don't really have any jackpots drops, which is a good thing. I want to showcase this as a baseline. Obviously, for a small sample size of 10 maps, you should not expect any jackpot drop, but if you are going to go after the chase div card like Apothecaries or Damnations, then you should be able to get them in like hundreds of maps, which is a pretty good for the strats in general because it's already a pretty good strats farming div card. And finally, we have the scarabs. I'd say that ambush scarabs of containment is what we're going after, but otherwise you are going to see a lot of scarab drop as it's going to be a major part of our profit as well. Now, the rest of the profits is going into the T16 8-modded canyon map, which I drops like 500 of them, average at about 4 chaos each, but I'm not willing to sell them, so I don't include them in the final calculations. So the 66.2 divine in revenue is actually doesn't have the maps calculated in there. So overall, it is going to be roughly 53 divine in profits. We get about 2.5 divine per maps on average. And if you can run 10 maps per hours, that is 25 divine per hours. But I'm willing to say that you can run maybe 8 maps per hour. So roughly 20 plus divine per hour is a pretty good baseline expectation for a strategy like this. So if you want to know more about the strats and want to learn on how to run this, then let's continue. I have had a lot of iterations on my other trees, but this is the one where I find it is the most profitable and consistent. So I'm going to go over through a few pointers and you can make the adjustment where you see fit. Well, this is an Abyss farm strats, but you can kind of see I don't have all the Abyss node allocated. This is because while it is an Abyss strats, we are farming the Abyss Hoards from the scabs of Edifice, which means that the only thing we care about is Trail of Destructions, where the Abyss going to lead to 4 pits. And I have pretty much nothing else. Corrupted Gaze is optionals and I don't take that. But yeah, Trail of Destruction is very important, and Underground Kingdom as well. You can see that we will have roughly 60% chance to spawn an Abyss, and then we take Underground Kingdoms, and because our maps are always going to have higher than 40% pack size, we will always have an extra Abyss in our maps. And this is the perk of running 8-modded maps, because as a baseline, 8-modded maps will always have 40% pack size or more. So that is the most important thing about Abyss. And the next thing is, because we are farming Scarab, you want to block the Scarab that is not worth running. And in this particular situations, and since the meta have already kind of settled, I choose to block these following Scarabs. For example, Deliriums, Ritual Altars, Expeditions. Those are like the ones that have the lowest value Scarabs, so you should block them. But the meta can always change, so just be flexible on that. And the next thing is going to be all these Scarab drop chance. I allocate them because, while we don't really focus too much on Scarab, the best thing about picking up these nodes is you're always going to pick up a lot of Scarabs from your maps. So they helps in a lot of way. And then you are going to pick up all the maps modifier nodes. So Shaping the Mountains, all the standards map nodes explicit modifier. And the 2 most important nodes over here, which is the memory influence chance. And they are going to give you more T16.5 map, which is what we want. The little thing over here is that if you take Chisel Perfections only when you want to roll your maps, because we are running 8-modded maps, we don't take Chisel Perfections. If you want to roll your maps with the chisels, then obviously take that. Other than that, I think that's everything about map mods and explicit modifiers. And the next thing I want to talk about is singular focus. And this particular note is going to give you only map that you favor, which means that we are going to favor canyons. But a little bit of disclaimer that if you do tech singular focus, you are going to drop less maps, which is not a problem because you can see from the loot breakdowns, we easily over-sustain this. It is worth noting that T16 Canyon is a natural T16 map, which means that if you don't tech singular focus and you are not running the Scarabs of Corruptions for 8-modded maps, you can use Orb of Horizon to reroll the other T16 maps into canyons and roll them as well. But that is another strategies where you want to go a bit higher investment, rolling with like the Maven chisels, and I don't want to get into that yet. But it is a possible strategies. And the last thing is I'm taking Eldritch Altar. Obviously at this point in the game, people care about Divine Altars because Searing Exarchs just doesn't drop anything that expensive anymore. So that is my Atlas skill trees currently. On the map setups, let's talk about the Scry option first. And you have two options this league. The first one is Basilica, where it's small jack party. You have 7 years of bad luck for 3 Divines drops, the Enlightenments for 110 Chaos, and Damnations for 46 Divines, which is equal to Apothecary somewhat. And you also have Ivory Temples, which have Icy Brothers for 7 Divines and Sephiroths for 1 Divines. So Ivory Temples would give you more consistent profit because these are more common drop of the div cards. And these, again, you are banking on the fact that you want to get a Damnation drops or 7-year bad luck. Otherwise, you're not going to get too much profit from the Enlightenment, but personally, I would go for Basilica anyway if you are planning to farm a bunch of these maps. On the map choices, T16.5 Canyon is the meta. This is because it is also a natural T16, so if you drop other maps, you have the ability to use Orb of Horizon to reroll into this map. Obviously, we are farming an 8-modded map strats, so you can use other open layout map as well. I suggest go for Jungle Valley or maybe Mesa. I think Dune is bugged right now, so don't do that. And the T17 Abominations not have the best layout, but you want to ideally use this. Roll with percentage more map to self-farm back T16.5 Canyon when you do run out or you're not self-sustained enough, which is very rarely. You just need to run a few T17 maps once in a while to get a bunch of T16.5 map back. And now, in terms of what maps to run, because we are running 8-modded maps, you don't really have a lot of choice. And so prioritize more maps percentage if you want to sustain your maps. And ideally, you want to prioritize running the more currency map as well, since it's a bit more profitable than the Scarabs currently. But again, don't be too picky. The idea here is just self-sustain and just run whatever map is at your disposal. In terms of map device setups, the obvious choice here is going to be Abyss for the map craft. This is going to put 1 more Abyss on every map, which is insane profit when thinking about doing the strats. The self-sustained Scarab setups is going to have 1 Cartography Scarab of Escalations, 1 Cartography Scarabs of Corruptions, that these are 2 at the core, which 2 Scarabs of Risk, and the Abyss Scarabs of Edifice, so these 3 should be the core for the self-sustained setups. This will give you back 8-modded T16.5 maps, and Risk just add a lot of profits onto your maps. And an alternative setups when you have more maps than needed, so you over-sustain, then you just put 4 Scarabs of Risk into the maps and run with the Abyss Scarab of Edifice. Obviously, if your build can handle it, but if you're thinking about it, the Risk Scarab is not that scary because it does not scale with the map modifiers, whatever the modifiers that the Risk Scarab add into your maps. So if your build is already capable of farming Risk, you might as well do 4 Risk, and even if you break your map, it is still profitable enough to just keep going at this point. The Scarab of Risk has always been the meta, is at quantity, rarities, and pack size onto your map all in 1 Scarab, which is why it is so strong. The more Risk scarab you can add onto your map, the more profitable your map will be, and therefore it is just much better if you can just run as much scarab of risk as possible. But not everyone enjoy playing the metas, and not everyone have build that can handle risk, which is why I'm going to share an alternative no-risk setup that I personally have been doing in the earlier part of the league when I don't really farm risk scarab yet. It's going to have basically the same baseline, but we are replacing the Scarab of Risk with the Abyss Scarabs. This is because Abyss Scarabs also add more Abyss onto the maps, which means that you are going to get loot from the ports all the same. It's just less loot, but you get more Abyss, and it's still quite ludicrous if you're able to open all of those ports. So this is an alternative setup that should work. And with that, I will leave you guys with a 20 maps highlight of my farms. Then I'm going to give you some tips and my thoughts on the strats after this highlight. So enjoy the highlights and see you in a bit. So yeah, that was 20 maps of Abyss in risk farming. If I have to give you some tips on this, make sure that you have a pretty good loot filters and be strict. Be very efficient with your maps so you can run more maps per hour or more Abyss per hours. You don't have to fully clear your maps, even though I do most of the time. Just make sure that you always clear all of the Abyss because they are money. If you didn't know, T16.5 before the nerf was having all T17 map mods if it was the 8 modded maps. So now that it was nerfed, a lot of people are not running 8 modded maps anymore, but I choose to still run it because the scarab of the corruptions are very cheap right now. So it is part of the setups and you will self-sustain this. So as long as you can keep running this over and over again, you will make profits. At the baseline, Abyss Hoards farming is insanely good at farming div cards, so always make sure that whatever maps, no matter what you farm, you want to scry a good div card onto the map or run maps with good div card first until you find the Nameless Seer. In example, I would not run Canyon without a good card scribed onto the map, so you will run Basilica or Ivory Temple until you find the nameless here, and then you scribe the card onto Canyon, and then I will start running Canyon. But yeah, that is everything I have for you guys today. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them down in the comment sections. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.